Earnestly Speaking Podcast, recording this on a Tuesday afternoon around 4:30 p.m., April 28th, 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, officially I'm here to give my review of the new Michael Jackson biopic called Michael. Yes, I'm here to do that for you. So, how you guys doing? And like I said, this is a movie that I was heavily invested in covering and watching. And as you guys know this very much so, that I am a massive fan of Michael Jackson. So obviously this movie is a massive deal for me. So I've seen the movie twice already. I saw it by myself first on last Thursday, which I requested to do on my own because I did not want anybody to go with me. Because I did not know how I would react. I did not know if I'd be overly emotional, which I absolutely was. I cried 3 times the first time I saw it. I actually was shaking first hour because I was very, very nervous to see what was into the movie. Like I said, I'm very invested in the story. You gotta remember, I'll be 46 on Friday. I've been a fan of this guy for 44 years. Michael Jackson means a lot to my family. You talk about 3 generations of fans: my mother, myself, and my oldest son, all diehard fans. So Michael Jackson is a big lineage in my family. So it's not just any movie. Michael, not just any superstar. This is someone we have admired, someone who I've always said has been very misunderstood. But the movie, how was it? So what I did with this movie is I decided to, instead of going a whole elaborate thing, like one blog or like in a style of blog anyway, I decided to just, let's keep it simple for the people. Let's keep it simple here. Let's do the typical, like the old school pros and cons of the movie. What was great about the movie was what was missing in the movie. I will say I went the first night. I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. Okay. Then I went the second night, and the second time I went with my kids on Sunday, and I felt a little less about the movie. I gave it a 7 out of 10. So I adjusted my score to 7 out of 10. But I want to tell you why. And we'll get into this, all of this in just a second with my review. I'm going to bring up my screen here for just a second. But like I said, the movie had a lot of great things about it and a lot of things that did bother me. And again, as a diehard fan, what we realize is that every person, whether you're a fan of Michael Jackson, not a fan of Michael Jackson, an admirer, just someone who's a fan of his music, we all have different things we were looking for in this movie. Okay, I know I had different. I know for a fact that myself, I had different expectations in this movie. So let's go to the pros for it. There's more cons on my list only because I want to elaborate more on the cons. The pros are pretty easy. Let's go to the pros first. And the reason why the movie is great in the first place: the performances. Jafar Jackson as Michael, fantastic. I remember friends telling me, if you close your eyes in a movie theater and listen to Jafar talk in this movie, you really would think it's Michael Jackson. You think it's Michael. And bro, they weren't lying about that. I thought it was some bullshit thing to saying. You just imitate Michael. Yeah, I get it. He's a nephew. I get that. But the fact that I actually did close my eyes a couple times in the movie, and every time he spoke, he literally sounded like Michael Jackson. Again, as someone who is a massive fan, who has watched every interview of his, listened to every unauthorized interview, things that weren't even public, things I know on public. The fact that he nailed the cadence of Michael Jackson is incredible. And you guys know, I have a massive issue with, I hate, let me do something right now. I hate impersonators in general. Not just Michael Jackson impersonators, but Elvis impersonators, you name it. You could be a Bruno Mars impersonator. I just don't like impersonators. I hate impersonators trying to imitate the artist. I prefer people paying tribute to him, like a dancer paying tribute to him as a regular person. It's just a weird thing. It's like the same thing about reason I don't like clowns. Okay. However, Jafar not only imitated Michael Jackson, Jafar Jackson became Michael Jackson, and I'm not being glib here. He really did. Like it's fascinating. Obviously, it doesn't look like him totally. In fact, I was joking around the movies like when Jafar would walk on his sides, like, oh, that's Jermaine, because of course it's Jermaine Jackson's son, so he's gonna look like Jermaine. Obviously, that's Jermaine's kid. But man, especially at the Thriller era, they nailed Michael. He nailed Michael in the Thriller era and look as well too. So the performances, the live performances especially too, especially with Bad at the end of the movie, fantastic. Great job by Jafar. Job well done there in this movie. Coleman Domingo as Joe Jackson, incredible. The father who played Joe Jackson in the American Dream movie that came in 1992, the miniseries. I forgot his name. I apologize for that. I've always said that he was the standard of a Joe Jackson role. But Cole Domingo came very close. I mean, this argument is split. I still love both roles. I think the only reason why I might give a little bit of edge to the American Dream one is only because of the fact that he had more space to be Joe. The movie had a lot more space for Joe to have his story fleshed out, which I'll get to in a second, because that's actually one of my cons in the movie. I'll get to in a second. But Coleman Domingo nailed, and in terms of look, number one, they nailed Joe's blue eyes. Like, I don't know if people know this, but Joe Jackson had blue eyes. They nailed that. Joe Jackson's demeanor, his bulldog demeanor, I think even more so than with the guy that played Joe in the miniseries, nailed that as well too. So physically speaking, this Joe Jackson was probably better. I think the role itself, I think it's a tie. Honestly, I'm split between the two. Honestly, I mean, I say the older one better, but only because the story is probably a little better in that one for Joe's sake anyway. But Coleman Domingo was fantastic. Coleman Domingo was absolutely incredible. This is why he's one of the best actors today in Hollywood. Okay, Nia Long as Catherine. Wow. I and for the record, when they casted her, I knew right away she would fit a Catherine. But my God, I think even more than Joe Jackson, the depiction of Catherine in this movie and the way she looks physically is, they nailed it. They absolutely nailed it with Nia Long as Catherine Jackson. And once again, the performances are great. They even got Catherine's limp. People don't know this, but Catherine Jackson had a limp when she walked, and that's in the movie. So the details to the characters were incredible. So Jafar, Coleman Domingo playing Joe, Jafar playing Michael, Catherine Jackson playing Catherine. I mean, Neil Long playing Catherine Jackson. Nailed it. The young kid that played, I think it's Giuliano, what his name is, the young Michael in the movie that played for the first half an hour. Nailed it too. Another one. Nailed it. And I'm kind of split on who was a better younger Michael, him or Jason Weaver. I actually might lean Jason Weaver by a smidge, because again, he had more to flesh out in the miniseries in comparison to the movie. So it's not even fair. It's not even fair, to be honest with you. But I thought he was great. Okay. The second thing I love about this movie, and this was the main thing for me, the main thing I wanted for this movie, my number one goal as a fan that I wanted to see in this movie. I wanted them to find a way to humanize Michael Jackson. And for the most part, they did. Now, obviously, 2-hour movie is a lot to get into, all that. But for the limited dialogue they had in the movie, they did a good job of humanizing him. Obviously, it could have fleshed out more into details, but they get into the fact that Michael Jackson was, a very strong guy, but also very soft. Not soft in a bad way, but more so very, very, very sensitive. Loved animals. And he was passive aggressive. Like, he wanted to fire his father as early as 1978, but the problem is he had managers do it for him. Okay, all those stories are true. Okay, But they did a good job for the most part of humanizing Michael Jackson, which again, I know a lot of critics have an issue with that, which I think is complete bullshit. Because why would you have an issue with a depiction of somebody that is actually real? Again, there's a, we'll get into critics in a second in the cons, because I have a lot of issues with the critics especially too. But I thought they did a very decent job of humanizing him. The one part that's been memed now a lot on the internet the last couple of days, like when Michael's went to the toy store, he bought a bunch of games and stuff. And then a lot of us for the kids at the hospitals, but also he brought home Twister. And he asked his brothers to play Twister with him. And the brothers said, no, I got other things to do. I'm not getting too old for that. Michael's in his 20s at this point now. And the brother, but he's still a child of heart. And, that Twister, that thing has been memed a lot in the last couple of days on the internet. But I thought that got to the core Michael Jackson, the part when when the family's in the home, and there's a big truck surprise that Michael has for the family. And they think like Michael is buying a new car. Most rock stars buy a new car or new this or new jewelry or that. And here it is, Michael Jackson getting a monkey. Okay? Again, that touches to the core who Michael Jackson was. He was very different. Okay? He didn't care for things like other rock stars did. Okay? He'd rather have animals and games and, hang out with kids and, this kind of thing, and it got to the point, to the core of who he was, and he humanized him, because that's who Michael Jackson really was at his core. All right. Also, while again, 2-hour movie, not enough time into it, but they did address the trauma. They addressed the trauma with Joe a little bit. They addressed the trauma with his vitiligo. They addressed the trauma with his hair getting burnt. And obviously, there's more. If there's a part 2. I really hope they lean into that too also, because a lot of the addiction to painkillers and the wigs he wore to his dying day, that all stems from the Pepsi accident. So we have to address that. So the fact they addressed I thought the best part of the movie also, outside the beginning, was also them being in the hospital, and seeing what he went through with the 3rd-degree burns from the Pepsi accident. And again, a lot of people don't understand just how big a deal that thing was. That accident set the course of his last 25 years of his life. Okay? That set the course for everything we see. Okay? The addictions, the distrust, all that stuff. It set the stage for a lot, if not everything, with his life. Okay? Which it never ended. It never ended until he passed away. But so they addressed the trauma in a good way, especially with the Pepsi accident. Again, stuff with Joe, could have gone more detail on that, but it's enough. Again, everything was surface level, which again, these biopics are naturally anyway. So it is what it is. All right. And again, vitiligo being addressed. I mean, they could have done a little more to vitiligo stuff, but and by the way, it shows that vitiligo was shown on his arms and his hands as far back as the late 70s. Which, by the way, I can tell you from my own personal experience, my own mother, who has met Michael many times over through his life, she met Michael one time in 1978 at the Wiz premiere. Which, by the way, if you guys know me personally, I probably shown you pictures of it. I have pictures of Michael with my mother, not my mom in the picture with him, but she took the picture of Michael, and she said that she first noticed his skin situation as far back as 1978 at the Wiz premiere. So that's for reference sake there too. Also, so that goes very accurate with exactly what my mother went through when she met him. So yes, but they at least addressed vitiligo. They could have gone a little more deep into vitiligo. Maybe that's what the hour 2 is going to be for, because obviously the vitiligo did not get out of control until probably the late 80s, early 90s. Which a lot of things also too, I believe some people have said that the Pepsi accident also triggered the vitiligo to get worse, apparently. I know lupus in there too also, especially. Hopefully part 2, if it does happen, which it sounds like it's going to be greenlit, does address those issues as well, okay? The last thing here that was a pro for me, Mike Myers as Walt Yetnikoff. It was a cameo, but I had no idea Mike Myers was in the movie until like the day before. And I'm a huge Mike Myers fan, obviously. Austin Powers and whatnot. Wayne's World, you name it. If you know the stories about Walt Yetnikoff, the head of CBS, and how he got Michael on MTV, that depiction that you saw in the movie was pretty close to accurate. Because Walt Yetnikoff was a very, very proud man, very loud guy. And a guy cursed a lot and all this stuff. So they nailed the depiction of Earnestly Speaking, and Mike Myers did a fantastic job of that. And that scene there where they're trying to get Michael on MTV to play Billie Jean, and MTV refuses to do it, and so he Nickov goes on a tirade. It's like, well, I'm going to pull all my artists off from the label off your off the video lineup. Basically, Bruce Springsteen, Cyndi Lauper, a few notables. Dave Bowie was in there too. Also, of course, the rest is history. Billie Jean goes on MTV. Not only is it a hit, it literally saves MTV. In fact, there's a story which I found out about this actually on an episode I did with Matthew Allen back in February. That Michael Jackson not only saved MTV out of bankruptcy not once, but twice. Obviously, the first time being here in the 80s, the early 80s with Thriller and all the videos they've done, all that stuff. But also, there was also a time in 1995 where supposedly MTV was having financial issues, and they begged Michael Jackson to perform at the VMAs that year in 95. And Michael did it. That performance obviously drew a lot of eyeballs. So Michael did a lot to save MTV, which is disgusting, the fact that MTV is treated like shit through the years, even though they bit the hand that fed them. Imagine that. It makes no sense. So those are my pros of the movie. Okay, now my cons. Like I said, I have more cons, but it's more so things I want to touch on here. Again, I like the movie a lot. Gave it a B, 7 out of 10. But here's the things that bother me. First con. The pacing was way too fast in the first hour. Okay? Way too fast. Again, they missed out a lot. And again, my biggest problem is that they start the movie at 1966. That's 8 years to Michael's life. There's a lot that happens there. And again, I know this is Michael Jackson's story, but it's important that if Joe Jackson is going to be in the movie and he's going to be the way he is, you have to tell him of his story a little more as to why he was the way he was. So the pacing in the first hour was pretty fast. You go from 66, they go to Motown within half an hour. Motown, Berry Gordy. You don't get a lot of Berry Gordy. This one scene or two scenes of Berry Gordy, and that's it. And then 1971, and then from that point on, you skip literally 7 years and go straight to 1978. So in there, you miss Michael going through teenage years, Dancing Machine years, of course. You got Michael and the acne issues, which was a massive deal for him when it came to his physical appearance and stuff, going through acne, a bad acne period back then. Which if you're watching the miniseries, they go into that heavily. You miss the brothers and him leaving Motown in 76 to go to CBS Epic Records. Okay, you miss all that. You miss the first two Jackson's albums. Actually, to be honest, the first three, because you missed the self-titled in 76, Going Places in 77, Destiny in 78. We get to 1978 with Jafar's first scene in the movie, and he's with Quincy Jones already. Okay, talking about the new album. Which, unfortunately, people forget that Michael and Quincy first met. Now, granted, they met before in the past, but the real meeting between Quincy and Michael, which launched the idea of doing an album together, was on the set of The Wiz. Remember, Quincy Jones did the score for The Wiz. Michael Jackson was in The Wiz as well, too. Also, now, obviously, there's probably rights issues as to why they couldn't use The Wiz material. I get that, but that's very important information there they could have used. The Wiz not being there is a big deal. So you go all the way from 71, from Michael's 13 years old, to 1978, when Michael's now a adult, 20 years old adult. All right, so the pace was bad. And then, which is fine. They spent time in the Off the Wall era, which I loved. His first nose job and all that stuff. Okay, but then after that, it gets into the muck and the Thrill era. And look, again, I know I'm not the target audience, so I get this. But I think they spent way too much time in making the Beat It video, also making a Thriller video. They kind of spliced out, take it out, making those like 2 minutes less than it were, and use those 4 minutes extra into other scenes in the front end. Just my opinion. Okay, but again, I'm not the target audience for the movie. It's for the casuals and whatever. Okay, again, they skipped a shit ton of years. The Wiz gone. Where's We Are the World? You have obviously they go into after him getting burned and the Jackson's family, the Victory Tour, and when Michael leaves the group, it goes right from 84 to 88, okay? So you miss We Are the World. You miss Captain EO. You miss him meeting Elizabeth Taylor. There's a lot of things in those, they're making it bad. It goes right to the performance of bad at Wembley Stadium in 88, okay? Now, granted, there's a possibility that when they start this movie again in part 2, they may go back and reverse course and start the bad era, which I hope, because the bad era is very important, because you're also following up the biggest selling album of all time. And that was a massive pressure for him back then. So you have to target that. Because remember, We opened this movie. A lot of this movie is about Michael's affirmations. Well, there were also affirmations for Bad to beat Thriller that he had addressed in the 80s. You gotta address that. So hopefully in part 2 they do that as well. Again, you started in 1966. That bothered me a little bit too. Also, we know Janet Jackson declined in the movie in being used and depiction being used. But where's Rebe? Why did Rebe decline? That was a little shocking. I was a little stunned by that one. No Rebe in there. Latoya's the only sister that was actually represented in the movie. Not that you necessarily need them, because in the end, even Janet, as great as she is, obviously I love Janet Jackson. Even though I still have issues with her because she still owes me the pictures from when I met her 2 years ago at a concert, but neither here nor there. You do forget that she's not in the movie, but still, it'd be nice to have her somewhere in the movie. I thought one of the most underrated parts of the movie was his relationship with his bodyguard Bill Bray. I thought they could have added more. I mean, you had a couple scenes there with when they meet at when he's a kid. Obviously, the scene where like Michael is going to Bill and telling him that I have to only be my own man. It's kind of, and Bill's telling him you have to move out, that kind of thing. People don't understand how close Bill Bray and Michael Jackson was. Like there's a famous letter that Michael wrote to Bill Bray right when he retired, and basically telling him to think to be a father to him, in a way that Joe was not. And I thought they could have fleshed a little more of his relationship with Bill Bray, but it's okay. They did good there, but they could have done more of that one. Let me see. Another thing that was a con for me, they made a mistake. I was surprised they made very little mistakes in this movie, honestly. But the one mistake I thought they made, was for me, again, diehard fan. So when Michael decides to leave the group, on Victory Tour, the last night in Los Angeles at Dodger Stadium, they were doing the song Work Day and Night. The real song he was doing it for was Shake Your Body, though. So they got the song wrong. Now, I don't know why they didn't use Shake Your Body. Out of curiosity, I don't know. Maybe it's a rights issue, which is crazy because Michael wrote both songs. I don't understand why it was an issue rights-wise, but whatever. Maybe Working Day and Night was much more of a better storytelling to in terms of the what was going to happen with him leaving the group and leaving the tour and all this stuff, and maybe that's why. I don't know. Speaking of the Jacksons, also too, the Jacksons tour circa 1980. Like they touched on it a little bit though, but I wish they could have got a little more into the Triumph tour. I know Victory is the bigger deal because Michael come off the Thriller. But I've always said, and there's a lot of hardcore fans like myself who make the argument that the Triumph era, post Off the Wall, pre-Thriller, is arguably Michael's peak as a performer. And honestly, that tour absolutely shits on Victory Tour. I mean, that's the last tour that the band, the group used real horns, for example, in the background. The energy was different. Michael was still on the cusp of becoming the biggest star in the world. I've been begging for years for, I don't know if the estate has the rights to it or the Jacksons has the rights to it, but whoever has the rights to the Triumph tour or more material from the Triumph era, we need more Triumph era material. We do. We just do. Make it happen somehow, some way. But I thought they could have done more. They did performance here. I don't think they did Ben, but that's about it. They could have done a lot more unpacking of the Triumph era, in my opinion. I thought that's one of the most remarkable eras of his entire career. Again, probably another rights issue too. Also, again, I had an issue with how long the Beat It video was in terms of the making the video and whatnot, and even Thriller. Where's Michael Peters? Michael Peters is a famed choreographer that helped choreograph Thriller and Beat It. Where was he in this movie? I didn't like that. I thought we should have made a mention of Michael Peters and his influence on the videos, of course. Like I said, Michael's great, but we also need to acknowledge people who helped him get there along the way. Okay? No Michael Peters. That kind of bothered me, of course. Like I said, I enjoyed the Bad performance at the end of the last scene of the movie, which is performing Bad on the Bad tour. But to me, the Bad performance was not necessary unless you were doing a lead up to the making of the album. Now, if part 2 again starts there, then fine. But that felt rushed. You go from 84 all the way to 88, and he's doing do the Bad performance, do the entire performance, and then the movie's over. And again, Jafar did fantastic. The performance was great. I argue that is the best performance of the entire movie. But You left out, there's a lot left out there. I thought it wasn't necessary. I thought you could end the show. At that point, you could just do the same thing you did in the miniseries. You just ended the movie in 84 and then start up in 88 or 86, whatever, for part 2, if indeed we go that direction. But again, that's also being a little picky, if you will. But that wasn't necessary. And then finally, my biggest gripe of the entire movie, all right, is the Joe Jackson story. Okay, so let me lay this out here real quick for you guys. There's a lot of conversation about it, and for years, but it's still continuing now, about Joe Jackson and his role as a father, and how he parented his kids, specifically Michael Jackson. Okay. You have a lot of people who are, and this is where it becomes very cultural too, especially because, black father, of course, and this and that, how they're portrayed in the media. Okay. All right. So the thing is, this is the problem with having the movie. If you watch the movie face value, you think that Joe Jackson is the most evil man in the world. There's no rhyme or reason why he did what he did. He just was a guy who just pushed his kids, got them out of Gary, Indiana, beat his kids to get there, and then didn't give a shit about his kids' feelings, whatnot. And a lot of that is true. A lot of that stuff is absolutely true. However, this is where context and nuance matters. This is why I had a problem with the movie starting in 1966. This is why the miniseries does a better job of fleshing out Joe Jackson's story. Okay? Joe Jackson, we have to know why Joe Jackson is the way he was. Okay? And this is why I don't justify his actions. Okay? I do acknowledge the fact that Joe Jackson was, did great in getting his kids out of the poorest city in the country. Okay, raising 9 kids. But the thing is, we don't get that story isn't being told. Okay, Joe Jackson being a black man in the poorest city in the country, in the pre-civil rights era, the amount of pressure that man faced to raise his kids to get out of the ghetto. Okay. That has to be told also, too. I think Joe Jackson deserves that at least, okay? So the answer on that one is more nuanced. Yes, we can agree that Joe Jackson was a terrible father to his kids, certainly emotionally. Let's go there. Do I think Joe Jackson loved his kids? Yes. Did he have a weird way of showing that? Also, yes. And the movie does not do a good job of fleshing that out. Why Joe Jackson was the way he was, okay? That's why a better depiction of that is the miniseries. I also think the MJ musical Broadway show does a better job of describing Michael Jackson than the movie does. Again, granted, the musical is a lot longer. The miniseries is a lot longer too, especially too. It's 4 hours. This movie was only 2 hours and 7 minutes. There's only so much you can do, and again, they only covered just 18 years. That's the funny part. Well, actually more than that, 22 years technically, but it skipped over a bunch of shit. But I thought Joe Jackson was as mean as he was and as controversial as he was and as whatever, he still deserved an explanation as to why. Okay, I'm not justifying Joe Jackson for what he did, because definitely he was not a good parent. Okay, abusive, emotionally abusive, especially too. Also, but there's something to be said also to the fact that Joe Jackson was also protective of his kids too, also in ways that we probably could not conceive until later on. Okay, does Michael Jackson fall into those holes, those troubled waters in his later years, if Joe's around a little more to protect him? Who knows? I mean, like I said, Joe did well in getting his kids out of the ghetto, but he did not. He also, again, this is very tough to talk about. He's also was a detriment in not preparing, especially Michael, as a father, mentally for the dangers ahead. And that's where the tragedy really ultimately happens. Now, here's what I'll say too also. Because the movie ends with Joe Jackson getting his. Obviously Michael leaves the group and that's it. He's gone. There was a reconciliation to Michael Jackson and Joe Jackson in later years. Okay? If you see during his trial, during his 2005 trial, he was there almost every day with Michael. If not every day. Okay? Holding his hand. Michael Jackson publicly forgave him. Okay? And you want to know where? He's done it many times on interviews. But most notably, it's actually one of the most touching speeches I ever heard. Michael Jackson did a speech, an hour or 2 hour speech at the Oxford University in London, England in 2001, March 2001. Okay? It's one of the most touching speeches I ever heard in my life. Okay? And he explained his relationship with his father, but also forgave him for what he did. Okay? So that has to be acknowledged. And I'm hoping that if there's part 2, we get the reconciliation of Michael and Joseph. Because if you're not going to explain Joseph, the front end of why he was where he was, you should at least give him the opportunity to have him and his son, not say bond, but at least figure things out. And let's just say the relationship improved. The relationship did improve years down the road. Again, a lot of things Joe's done in the past that I don't approve of, even when he died. Remember him being on BET Awards the night Michael Jackson died. And he was there promoting his artist because he was still producing. And meanwhile, it didn't seem to carry the world that his son passed away. Maybe he was hurting inside, didn't want to show it. Maybe he was being prideful. But Joe at least deserved a better story. And especially because of the fact that if he's the protagonist in the movie, he deserves to have his day of explanation. And that's my biggest flaw with this movie. Otherwise, the movie's been a success. Right now, it's already at $217 million in the box office in this 3-4 days. Phenomenal opening, already the biggest opening to a biopic ever, and it's not even close. They're saying that it could hit $4 million by next weekend. You go on social media, not everybody's talking about the movie, negative and positive, of course. Rotten Tomatoes obviously gave it a low score, which I understand why to some degree, but again, there's also a real anti-Michael Jackson agenda out there, which people need to acknowledge. It has been out there since 1985. Okay, since 85. Okay, acknowledge that. But overall, like I said, I gave the movie a 7 out of 10. I readjusted after seeing it a second time. I will see it again. I'm hoping to see it in IMAX this time, though. But other than that, go see it. It's worth watching. Watch it. That's all I tell folks. Don't listen to the critics. See the shit for yourself. See the movie for yourself. Judge it for yourself. If you like it, you like it. You don't like it, at least you gave it an opportunity. I have friends of mine who didn't like it either. But I respect it. You know why? They at least paid the money, go see it themselves. It's to listen to damn critics. Go see it yourself. Judge it on its own merits based on what you think, what critics think, and because again, you are smarter than critics anyway. So, like I said, 7 out of 10, and Michael Mania, I guess, is back because everybody, I can't turn around, but people talk about him all the time. And again, there's a lot of people. I'm doing a better job now of not gatekeeping Michael Jackson because I've been a fan for as long as I have, and I've been consistently a big fan even to the worst times, even when it's quiet. You know what I'm saying? I know it's cool now to like him again, which is awesome. I love it. I love seeing his legacy being upheld and people at least get a better understanding of who Michael Jackson was. But I'm also trying to do a good job. I'm doing a good job of it of not gatekeeping Michael Jackson. So anyway, go see the movie. That's my review of Michael. I am planning also in the next couple of weeks on doing a roundtable with a few journalists, a couple of Michael Jackson influencers, on the show in the coming weeks. I'm going to do a big roundtable on the movie itself, so look out for that as well, too. We'll have more content with Michael on this feed in the coming weeks as well, too. Again, I'm on X at EJ Christian 7. Earnestly Speaking Podcast goes all podcast catchers. Thank you for listening to this review of Michael Jackson's biopic, Michael. And until the next episode, we will talk to you guys soon. Later.